I want to talk about how content influences the user interface, because content really has to come first and then the layout second. If you build out an interface before you have the content, then the problem is that it might not actually suit your needs. And so you're going to have something that might be clunky to use. So let's go ahead and answer some initial questions. First of all, what is the goal of the site? Which content will be time relative? Which content will be permanent? Which content should or could be organized by the category for search purposes? How deep do I want my navigation to go? Do I need or want sidebars? Does the nature of this site determine whether it has a long or short lifespan? And finally, how might my focus change or expand in the future? These are just some of the things that you can ask yourself when you're first starting a website that will really help you make some decisions about things like navigation, layout, how you want your content to be delivered. Okay, so let's answer those questions in the context of a specific project example. So we're going to use this one: create a completely responsive WordPress website featuring a minimum of 6 places of interest in the greater San Diego area. What's the goal of the site? And this is sort of like a more generic overview than the specific objective: to explore and review significant beach pier landmarks in the greater San Diego area. So that's what I want to start with, maybe, is going and researching beach piers, because to me, maybe that's really interesting. And, I can go do photography there, and those are things I like to do anyway, and maybe I want to write some reviews and explore and so forth. And we're not even going to address just yet about, the actual layout. We're just talking about general content right now. Okay, so which content's going to be time relative? So I'm going to be writing some articles about different piers, and I'm going to start with 6. So it's not like it's going to be a portfolio of things, for instance. It's going to be articles. And which content's going to be permanent? So I can envision just off the top of my head that I would want maybe a contact page. That's pretty normal. Maybe I'm going to have a page that sort of organizes the list of current articles. That could be like a blog page or something. And then also I'd like to have a page that's about the author. And which content could or should be organized by category for search purposes? So I'm thinking of the things that just off the top of my head that some people might care about would be like by city, specifically by general area, like South Bay, North County, like neighborhood kind of, San Diego proper. And then also, like, are these dog-friendly beaches? I could go on with other categories, but we can start with those. And how deep do I want my navigation to go? I prefer that it goes no more than 2 levels deep. And, let me just jump back. This particular question about category for search purposes, it's not just about using a search tool or search bar. This also could generate, these categories could generate types of navigation. And so you have to think about how important these things are for a user to be able to search based on these things like dog friendliness. Like, that would be something quite important to me if I wanted to know where I could take my dog. Maybe I'm new to the city and I need to know which ones are dog friendly. And that would be one of the first things that I'd probably search, regardless necessarily of what area it's in. So you'd have to think, do I want to include that sort of in my normal navigation? But you still can figure out, I'd prefer not to go more than, say, 2 levels deep, because that's when your navigation can start to get a little bit hairy. And also, search engines don't like deep navigation. That's something to think about too. Users don't like to have to click too many times to find something. Then they just get frustrated and lost, and maybe they go away. Do I want or need sidebars? So this is not necessarily something you have to ask up front, but it's probably a good idea to ask yourself, because you're going to be faced with that when you start to look at themes. And you have to decide, like, how important is it to have sidebars or to not have them. So, my response would be, I'm okay with sidebars if it helps usability and ease of, and that's supposed to be ease of navigation, but I don't prefer them. So if there's a way that I can make this website really user friendly and easy to find stuff, then I prefer to not have sidebars. But it just depends on specifically what it is that I'm trying to do. Maybe a sidebar would be good for certain types of things. Who knows? Okay. Does the nature of the site determine whether it has long or short lifespan. That's something to think about, you know. So the reason I put that there is there are going to be websites potentially that you make that really are about having a really short lifespan. A good example would be like if there's a specific event and you want that event to be promoted really well, like if it's a big party or like a club happening, but it's not part of a larger website, for instance. Like a good example also would be like a conference. Let's say that you're going to host some sort of conference or you're being hired to do a conference website, and it's not part of some larger organization, it's just a conference website. Well, that's something that's going to have a really short lifespan. So pretty much the navigation and things that you build into it, it's not like they're going to have to expand and expand and expand over the years, because it's something that's going to serve its purpose for a period of time and then it's going to end. And so you can generally, you know, anticipate the needs of users a lot better in some ways than you can anticipate the way that a certain other kind of website might grow over time. And so for this website, I could imagine that if, you know, it's something that I was really interested in, it potentially could have a long lifespan, as the content will likely stay relevant for a long time. And instead of just getting rid of the old content, you just leave it there and you just add new content. So the reason that that's important is because you have to think also then about how content focus might change or expand in the future. If you think that it might change or expand, you know, I could imagine that I can only talk about so many peers, for instance. So if I'm going to only be able to talk about so many peers, then maybe peers, the word peers isn't something important in like major navigation. You know, maybe I would want to call it destinations or something like that, you know, so that your navigation doesn't have to change. One of the things to think about is when your navigation changes over time, if a lot of people have discovered that page or a set of pages, the search engines have discovered those pages, and then you go and you change the URL completely, then that breaks a lot of your searchability with search engines and stuff. And so it's kind of nice to keep some continuity. So if you could think like in a broader scope and, you know, maybe not just go, okay, well, this is all just about restaurants, or it's all just about, you know, hiking trails. Maybe it's really about the larger sense of recreation, if it's, you know, about hiking or whatever. And you can start to think about ways that you might expand it or that it might grow, especially like if you were to imagine having new contributors who would want to contribute about other things that weren't just about piers, for instance. Maybe it would be about other beach things, or even potentially a lot of other things to do recreationally in San Diego. But you're figuring out a place to start, but also where it's possible to create more expansive language, say in your navigation and search terms and things like that, go ahead and do that as long as it still makes sense and it's still easy to use. Okay, so from those questions, I came up with some basic overview statements, right? And then I sort of highlighted some things that I see that are important. Right, the current goal of the site is to explore and review. Okay, and then it goes on about beach pier landmarks, right? But it's about exploring and reviewing. You know, the site's time relative and content will be articles. That's what's important. The time relative stuff is going to be articles. And then the pages are going to be contact, or the permanent stuff, right? Contact, a page with a list of current articles like a blog, and about the author. Okay, and then search things I said were important right off the bat, and we could come up with more later maybe, but we would start with like city search, an area search, and, you know, dog friendliness. And maybe area would be called neighborhood or region, or who knows what. We'll have to figure that out later. And then I prefer to go no deeper than 2 levels of nav, and I'm okay with sidebars, all right? But don't prefer them. I should have highlighted that. And it's going to have a long lifespan potentially, and I hope to expand. All right, those are all really important statements that help me understand how my content is going to work, and also then I can start to build an inventory of pages and posts. And you want to kind of do this a little bit before you get started. And a lot of times people will sort of start doing this inventory in their heads and they won't actually write it down. But I think that it's a really good exercise to just write these things down, answer those questions, and really it's like doing a design brief. It's a like doing a limited design brief for a client, and you should do this. I think it's a really good process to go through because it's what you should be going through with your clients. So your pages. All right, so we said a page of the current list of articles. Well, that would be a blog, and I think that that makes sense to be a landing page because that means the content potentially is always going to be changing. And having new content on the front page of your website is a good idea because it keeps people interested. So about the author. All right, that's a page, and then contact is a page. And then we decided that we have these 6 starting posts about, I decided I'm going to visit Oceanside, Scripps, Crystal Pier, Ocean Beach, Coronado Landing, and Imperial Beach Pier. Okay, so those are the first articles that I'm going to write, take pictures of, and do mapping information and so forth. Okay, so that would be interesting stuff to people. Okay, so what's missing? We didn't really talk about the navigation that's based on category sorting. Remember that? Okay, so categorical navigation is important, and you have to think about like what is important about it and how is it going to be important so you can figure out where to put it, because sometimes it ultimately ends up being major part of the website, and other times it sort of is like a just sort of an additional option that you can give people. And it really just depends on what the goals are, I think, of the website. So if I said how important is this feature to your users, well, I've decided that it's kind of important to be able to search for things like, you know, is it dog friendly? That question alone would be important to me, and I can imagine that there would be a lot of other questions too, like things that maybe are rated based on cleanliness. Like if you wanted to come up with a rating system, like cleanliness or accessibility friendly, things like that. So you could come up with lots of other kinds of things that would really make a difference to your users, and it would make your audience broader potentially. So also, like how many clicks is it going to take for somebody before they're able to actually get to the sort, right? That's important too. And that has to do with the depth of your nav, right? So you also need to decide if you want it to be persistent, on every page, right? So is that something, those sortable options, is that something that's important that they have access to on every single page? And if so, you also need to decide, like, do you want to put this in the global nav, like promote it all the way up to the global navigation? Do you want to sort of put it in the sidebar where it's always present and easily accessible? Maybe it's not as obvious as the global nav, but it's still important in the sidebar. Or do you want to demote it down to the footer? Or do you want to do that in multiple ways? So you have to decide that for yourself. And what I've kind of decided for this example, and it could have been done in many different ways, but I've decided that maybe what I'll do is I'll just actually make a page for that, and then within that page I will put links to the sortable categories. And there are ways you can do this dynamically. You can use plugins, for instance, to do this, and that's what I'll show you how to do. But there are also other ways, like if you were to get the right theme, that might be an option as well. Okay, so we can also choose to put the category links in the footer to be persistent on every page as well. Because in this example, I have something that's part of probably my global navigation, and I'm going to call it destinations, right? Instead of like piers or something, because who knows, it could change the type of thing that we're going to review. Right now, it's all piers. That's fine. It can expand later, though. So we're going to call it destinations, and that's the kind of thing that somebody would probably want to click on. They go, oh, okay, that sounds like something I'm interested in. Where do I want to go? But that's just one page. And so outside of that destinations page with this current outline right here, you don't see that that's a feature that's available anywhere else to find things based on sorting categories. So we can put it in the footer on every page, and it's a demotion, but it's still available on every single page, and that's important. What that ends up being, if you count it, is we've got 4 pages and 6 posts. So that's a good starting place for us to just start adding some content. After we've done our reviews and taken our pictures and done all that stuff, we can start putting some content in there and then working with it and looking for themes that we think are going to work really well for what we want to do. And it's important that you also understand that this is not the end-all be-all. Like, there could be things that change once we get into it. It's a very good place to start, though.